Hello everybody, I'm Gwen Campbell-Mindes. Welcome to Gwen's Bookish Ramblings, and today is the third in the pseudo-trilogy that I have been doing for the past couple weeks, Dave Barry's Greatest Hits. Let us move on to the cover. So, this is from 1988, or rather published in 1988, and so the thing about this is some of it dates itself simply because, well, if he's talking about events that occurred in 1988, 1987, 1986, well, they're not recent. But at the same time, one of the great things about Dave Barry's columns is that the less topical they are, the more likely you look at it and you say, yeah, no, this is still true today, and sometimes that makes you sad. Kind of like when listening to Tom Lehrer's songs and realizing exactly how many of them are still topical, which is a deeply depressing thing. But a lot of them aren't. The second column in this book, Snooze, is him just talking about a lot of people tend to accuse him of making things up, and sometimes he does, but a lot of what he does is, well, as the line goes from a different collection of columns that he wrote, he is not making this up. A lot of what he says is just repeating actual honest-to-God news items, which, I mean, a lot of people would mail him and say, here, look at this article, this is a thing that happened. And so, the Snooze one is him writing a column where he just wrote down things that were actually true. Readers are sometimes critical of me because just about everything I write is an irresponsible lie, but now I'm going to write a column in which everything is true. See how you like it. So then he talks about a news release from the J.I. Case Company, and J.I. Case and Burlington, Iowa, the loader backhoe capital of the world, today jointly celebrate the production of the 175,000th Case loader/backhoe. And then he phoned the city of Burlington in Iowa. Was that Iowa? Yes, Iowa. To ask if they really call themselves the loader backhoe capital of the world. He writes about a person with a funny-sounding name, at least funny-sounding to us Anglophones, who was the Governor General of the island nation of Mauritius from 1968 to 1982. He talks about a decision handed down by the Georgia Court of Appeals that somebody had hired someone to mow her lawn and then sued because they slipped on some dog poo and allegedly cut their left foot because of it, and the usual odd things that you can find in the news. But he also talks about his childhood about telling jokes, and his childhood in which there was a joke that a friend of his named Eugene had the punchline, ding dong, damn it, ding dong. Maybe you know this joke. It involves marital infidelity and a closet. And the way that joke brought everybody together and also really, really super irritated their camp counselors. And you listen and you read these and you think, maybe I didn't have that exact experience, but there's a universality to aspects of what he says, and even if it isn't something you've personally experienced, you look at it and you say, I remember being that age, and yes, if I had been in that situation, that would have been a thing. This is also one that includes one of my personal favorite columns, which almost never fails to kill me laughing, which is one of his Dogs Are Stupid columns. Now, for the record, of course, Dave Barry has dogs, or at least for many years had dogs. I don't know if he still does. But he clearly and regularly states that dogs are dumb because, well, dogs, for the most part, aren't all that bright. People, for the most part, aren't all that bright, but dogs in their way are even less bright. And so he has this bit about a dog he had called Shauna, who, as he described it, that they thought at first she was smart as a whip because she was a purebred German shepherd who had this extremely alert look. At first we took this to mean she was absorbing every tiny detail of her environment with her keen senses and analyzing it with computer-like speed, but it turned out to be her way of expressing the concept. What? And he goes on to describe Shauna not being able to really comprehend the notion of, look, there's a squirrel. And then he talks about the only dog that he ever met that was dumber than Shauna, which is a collie named Augie. And of course, if you grew up watching Lassie, or in fact, know anything about Lassie, you would of course assume that collies are smart because Lassie the dog, who by the way was supposed to be female but was in fact played by a male dog, basically is, supposed to be a super genius dog who's forever rescuing people and so on. Frankly, I think you'd have a better deal with it if you were watching The Littlest Hobo, who I believe is a German Shepherd. Littlest Hobo is a great show, which was wholly episodic, in which the only consistent character was this dog, who would basically show up at the start of the episode, and he'd, help children, orphaned children, find adoptive parents, and reunite families, and all kinds of stuff like that. And he'd just kind of wander around, and he'd spend, the length of the episode hanging around whoever it was, and he would basically solve all their life problems by being adorable. And then, at the end of it, he'd wander off and continue on. And it had this theme song about maybe tomorrow I'll want to settle down, until tomorrow the whole world is my home. Really, you should look it up. Assuming you're not one of those people who thinks that episodic television is a blight on the face of the planet because everything should be part of the grand scheme of world building and the lore and the ongoing plot arc. But anyways, before I get into a rant about that, the section about Augie is just, it kills me every time, because it's about how Augie doesn't sleep. What she does is, first she lies down, then she scratches herself, then she engages in loud personal hygiene, then she thinks, maybe I can go out. And she walks across the floor, which is made of a special kind of hardwood, so that when a dog walks on it, it goes tick, 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 at exactly the volume you would use to get maximum benefit from the Chinese ticking torture. When Augie gets to the front door, which is of course closed, it is always closed at night, even the domestic insects have learned this by now, she bumps into it with her head, then she backs up and bumps into it with her head a couple more times, in case there has been some mistake. Then she senses, somehow, that there is a person sleeping on the couch, and she has the most innovative idea she has ever thought of, which is, maybe he will let me out. So she walks over to me and noses me in the face, using the same nose she uses for hygiene, and I say, damn it, Augie, go to sleep. So she lies down for 1 minute, at which point, she does it again, and apparently again and again and again all night. And I've always adored that particular one. I mean, yes, I'm a cat person, and I fundamentally believe that cats are better than dogs because cats are evil and hate you. It is, after all, the fundamental thing about cat people and dog people, if you self-identify as one or the other. What you have to understand is that you will never resolve this, because the things cat people like about cats are the things that dog people hate about cats. And the things that dog people like about dogs are the things that cat people hate about dogs. If you love the fact that your dog bounds up to you at the door and jumps on you and is delighted to see you because they think that the fact that they didn't see you for 2 hours means you are never coming back, well, then that's good. If you're a cat person, you look at this and say, my God, why would you want this? Whereas the fact that cats are independent-minded and don't have time for you, and if they want to be petted, they will show up and be petted. Otherwise, they want to be left alone, and cat people think that this is fantastic and awesome, and they love the independent nature, and they love the fact that cats are not putting up with this. Whereas dog people say, why would you want a pet that doesn't want you to pet them? So, it's the kind of thing where that's a thing that's never going to be resolved. So we who are cat people and those of you who are dog people need to just agree on an armistice where we agree to disagree and try to, if we're discussing fuzzy animals, to only discuss rabbits or capybaras. And if you find capybaras freaky because they are giant rodents, well, then I have nothing to say to you, because frankly, a capybara is adorable. So anyways, this is, it's the usual collection of randomized bits and pieces that he talks about, including several of the articles that he wrote, which are they're kind of specifically supposedly addressed to specific people, often supposedly children. And I very much like his closing one, in which he writes very much from the perspective of parents who have to watch their children in school plays. Because, of course, the thing about it's a review done in imitating the style of a proper play review of Clan of the Cave Rhinoceros is play review, The Cave People, written and performed by the Rose Valley School kindergarten class, featuring Dave Barry's son Robert Barry as one of the woolly rhinoceroses. And the thing is, it manages to walk that fine line between making fun of a kindergarten class putting on a play, because, let's be honest, kindergartners don't usually put on the greatest of plays for viewers. One is generally shocked if anyone below grade 9 can put on a play that would be considered competent in an adult fashion. But at the same time, of course, this is a play being watched by a bunch of parents of small children who are just sitting there taking pictures that they will, of course, embarrass their children with 10 years later when those kids are trying to, introduce their date to their parents, and their parents insist on bringing out those photographs. But also, it ends on the big schmaltzy final note of course, the woolly rhinoceroses, being unable to speak, could only pat their stomachs in a satisfied manner, but they did this in such a convincing and moving way that even veteran critics wanted to rush right up and give them a great big hug. Because, of course, he's still Robert's dad, and he still is doing the dad thing. So, I enjoy this book, of course. And that's all I have to say, so I'll see you all next week.